Tennessee Democratic lawmakers announced over the weekend plans to introduce bills in the upcoming legislative session that focus on statewide police reforms. Joining us now to discuss this proposed legislation and the aftermath of the Nichols killing is Tennessee State Senator Ramesh Akbari, who represents parts of Memphis. Thank you so much for being here today. Two of your colleagues in the legislature revealed several proposals over the weekend, from mental health care evaluations for police to an emphasis on de-escalation techniques. First, I just want to know how you're doing, how the community is doing, and what your take is on these proposals.
I think that the community is devastated, certainly reeling from the events that have, taken place for the past several weeks. I think we all empathize and feel great, sympathy for Tyre Nichols' mother. But the most important thing that we're focusing on is making sure that real reform happens in light of what happened to Tyre. And I think that's really how we move forward, how we heal.
And what exactly would that reform look like to you?
Well, a few years ago, Tennessee passed the eight can't wait of statewide practices. There's no teeth in that. Mr. Nichols passed away from his beating, and they were charged with murder. But say, for instance, there's someone else where the extreme doesn't happen. And, they may lose their job, but we want to make sure they also have some criminal charges. Looking at continued de escalation, use of force, and mental health evaluations. But honestly, I'll tell you, it's hard to legislate a culture change. And so, what I'm focusing on is making sure that we continue to hold our police chief, our mayor, and everyone else accountable. This is a partnership to make sure that things like this never happen again, that Tyre Nichols does not happen again, because we cannot have another mother having to hear their son cry out to them as they are the victims of police brutality.
That's a really good point, because implicit bias has been such a huge part of this conversation, because the officers directly involved, as we know, were Black, so it is a huge part of this conversation as well.
Right, and with all that being said, you represent parts of Memphis. What are you hearing from people about their concerns in the meantime? While there is work to be done, of course, in fixing the police system, are people feeling nervous right now? Do they feel safe?
Well, I think that folks were really grateful that the police chief, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and the DA swiftly brought charges. They fired the officers, and there is this review of these, specialty units, starting with the Scorpion unit being disbanded. So I think people are reassured by that. But certainly there is this belief and fear that, I think John Moran expressed it the best. He said, I have to drive home and I have a child. If this can happen, to Tyre Nichols, it could happen to anyone. And to your point about implicit bias training, our legislature right now is trying to ban implicit bias training in schools. My first interest in that type of training was because a Georgetown study said that Black teachers were harsher on Black students. And so it really is an overarching, cultural issue that really has to get at the heart of these supremacist thoughts. And I'm hoping that I don't want to say that this event will be a catalyst, but it will give people courage to really recognize something meaningful has to change.
And we certainly thought that when George Floyd died, we thought that was the catalyst. When Breonna Taylor died, we thought that was the catalyst. And so we can only hope that this will be that moving forward. But I want to ask you this. The NAACP is asking that all the police participants, including those who are just kind of walking about, be fired and prosecuted, as well as these 5 officers that I mentioned before. What do you think should happen to those officers who did nothing to stop the situation or to help Nichols? We know that 2 EMTs were relieved of their duties as well, just for their negligence in this situation. What do you think should happen moving forward?
Well, I think duty to intervene and to render care is extremely important. I mean, that's a cultural change. But the DA has indicated that he's continuing to investigate all of the officers, all the people that were at the scene, and additional charges are likely forthcoming. I think the most heinous actors were the ones they focused on. You saw how swiftly that investigation took place and the charges. But as the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation said, this is an ongoing investigation. And so, hoping that all those who had an opportunity to save Mr. Nichols' life will face the consequences of their actions or inactions.
All right, Tennessee Democratic State Senator Ramesh Akbari, thank you so much for joining us and your insight. We appreciate it.
Of course.